The unearthing, the planet was alive with storms. Clouds rolled in endless waves across the dark sky, and the ground shifted like something beneath the surface was moving. Every sound carried a weight of danger. It was not just another planet. It was a Class 15 Deathworld, a place marked as unfit for life, a place where survival was not expected but impossible. Few dared to land here, and those who did rarely returned. A small team of alien explorers had come anyway. Their ship, battered from entry through the storm-filled sky, had set down near a mountain range that looked broken and torn apart, as if something had clawed through it long ago. The team moved carefully, scanning every shadow, every shift of the soil. They carried sensors and weapons, but the fear in their eyes was stronger than the steel in their hands. The mission was simple. They had been sent to study strange signals rising from beneath the planet's surface. The signals were old, far older than their technology. Something was buried here, and their leaders demanded to know what it was. No one expected to return alive, but discovery was worth the risk. The air burned cold as they moved forward. Their instruments beeped louder with every step. Soon the ground beneath their feet began to shake. One of them, the youngest, dropped to his knees and pressed his clawed hand against the dirt. It was warm. Not natural warmth, but something mechanical, something alive. Then the earth cracked open. The team stumbled back as rocks split and dust rose in violent clouds. From below came a deep, hollow sound like the roar of an ancient beast. A shadow grew larger, breaking through the ground, until the explorers could see the edge of something metallic. At first it looked like a wall, but it was not a wall. It was a surface curved and endless, stretching far into the horizon. It was a ship. The explorers stared in silence, their voices caught in their throats. The object was massive, larger than anything they had seen before, its black surface glinting with the faint glow of strange lights. Slowly, the soil slid away as more of the ship revealed itself. The hull was scarred and burned, yet it looked alive, pulsing faintly as if the ship itself had been waiting. One of the explorers whispered, his voice trembling, "No one builds ships here. This world kills everything." But the ship was there, and it was awakening. The ground trembled harder and dust poured into the air. A long, deep hum spread across the valley. Lights appeared along the side of the ship, one after another, forming lines of orange fire that glowed brighter than the storm above. The explorers stepped back, their eyes wide. This was not ruins. This was not a grave. The ship was alive. Suddenly, a sound echoed through the air, sharp and powerful, like metal grinding against the bones of the earth. The explorers covered their ears, but the sound went deeper than sound. It shook inside their heads, a voice without words. Something had seen them. Something had noticed they were there. Their leader ordered them closer. Fear pulled at their bodies, but curiosity was stronger. They moved toward the surface of the ship, their scanners buzzing with energy too strong to measure. They saw markings across the hull, symbols carved deep into the metal. At first they thought it was alien language unknown to them, but then their eyes narrowed. The markings were not alien. They were words. Words written in straight lines and sharp angles. The explorers stared, their minds struggling to accept what they saw. It was a language they had seen only in scattered records, a language feared across the stars. It was human. A silence heavier than death fell over them. None dared speak. None dared move. The discovery was too great, too impossible. Humanity was a young race, new to the stars. How could their language be on a ship buried in a death world so old it seemed to predate memory itself? The ground shook once more, harder this time. Dust and rock rained down from the cliffs above. The ship groaned, its massive frame rising higher, breaking free from the chains of soil that had trapped it for centuries. A beam of light shot from the front of the ship into the clouds, splitting the sky in two. The explorers ran for cover, their hearts hammering. The sound of engines roared, but no engines they had ever known. It was deeper, older, a sound like the heartbeat of the planet itself. The ship rose higher, towering over the mountains, its size too vast to believe. And then for the first time a voice came. Not in their language. Not in any alien tongue. It spoke in human words. The explorers froze. None of them understood the meaning, but the voice was calm, steady, filled with authority. It was not a recording. It was the voice of a machine alive with memory, alive with purpose. The truth sank into their hearts like a blade. This was not a ship they had discovered. This was not theirs to claim. It already belonged to humanity. And humanity, it seemed, had always been here, waiting for the galaxy to remember. The first awakening, the explorers stood frozen as the ship rose higher, its black surface glowing with streams of orange light. The valley around them shook like the planet itself wanted to throw them off. Dust clouds swirled into the air, covering the stars, yet the ship shone through as if it carried its own sun. One of the explorers pressed his scanner tight against his chest. The device screamed with signals, numbers spinning faster than he could read. He whispered to the others, his voice broken. "This is older than us. Older than anything we know." The leader ignored him. His eyes stayed locked on the massive ship, his throat dry. He could not explain why, but he felt as if he was standing in the presence of something holy and terrible at the same time. This was not just metal and engines. This was memory, a memory that had been waiting under the ground for ages. The ship's hum grew louder. Then, with a sudden pulse of light, the entire surface of the hull flickered. Panels slid open, revealing long rows of windows glowing with fire-like energy. The explorers gasped. The ship was not dead. It had only been sleeping. And now it was awake. From deep inside came a vibration that felt like a heartbeat. The sound echoed in the bones of every explorer. It was slow, heavy, and alive. The youngest one stepped back, shaking his head. "We should leave. This is not meant for us." But the leader stepped forward. His claw touched the black metal surface. It was warm, not the warmth of the sun, but the warmth of blood moving under skin. He pulled his hand away, but the glow where he touched remained, spreading across the surface like veins of fire. Suddenly, the ground beneath them cracked again. From the bottom of the ship, a ramp began to unfold. It was slow, almost graceful, as if the ship itself was inviting them in. The explorers exchanged fearful looks. None wanted to go first, but none wanted to leave either. Curiosity pulled at them stronger than fear. The leader gave the order. They would enter. The ramp touched the ground, and a path of orange light guided the way inside. The explorers moved carefully, weapons raised, scanners buzzing. Every step echoed through the valley like thunder. When they reached the entrance, they paused. The air that flowed from inside was cold, clean, untouched by time. They entered. The hall was massive, stretching higher than any cathedral they had seen. The walls were smooth, lined with lines of light that pulsed like veins. Machines, silent and still, stood against the walls, waiting. The floor shone like glass but carried the weight of stone. It felt alive, every step sending ripples of sound that seemed to echo back. Then they saw it. On the wall above them were symbols. At first they looked strange, like alien carvings. But as their eyes adjusted, the truth cut through their minds like a blade. They were letters, words, written in the human language. The explorers froze. None of them could read it, but they recognized the script. The same language that had once been whispered in galactic councils as a warning. Humanity. The newcomers. The survivors. A species that had risen too quickly, from nothing to starwalkers defying every prediction. One of the explorers spoke in a shaky voice. "How can their language be here? This ship is older than our records." Before the leader could answer, the ship itself responded. A voice filled the hall. It was not sound as they knew it. It came from everywhere, vibrating in the walls and the floor in their bones. It was deep, calm, and steady. The explorers did not understand the words, but they knew the language. Human language. The youngest covered his ears and shouted, "It speaks in their voice." The leader's heart raced. The voice was not broken or old. It was alive, aware, speaking with purpose. They had not discovered a ruin. They had woken something that was never meant to die. Lights across the hall flared to life, stretching deep into the distance. The walls shifted, revealing long corridors leading deeper inside. Each was lit by the same orange glow, guiding them forward like veins of fire inside a living body. The leader gave the command. They would move deeper. They had no choice now. As they walked, the ship seemed to watch them. Doors opened before them and lights flickered on as they passed. They reached a chamber at the heart of the ship. At its center stood a pedestal glowing with energy. On it rested a sphere floating above the surface. The sphere turned slowly, and as it turned, images flickered inside. Worlds burning, fleets colliding, stars shattering in silent explosions. The explorers stared in horror. The images were not history as they knew it. These were battles they had never been taught, wars that had been erased. And always at the center of every battle was the same figure, the shape of humans. The sphere pulsed with light. Then it spoke again. This time the explorers did not hear words. They saw them. Symbols burned into their minds. Property of humanity. The leader staggered back, his chest tightening. The truth was clear. This was not just a ship. This was a warning, a shadow from a past the galaxy had tried to forget. The youngest fell to his knees. His voice shook as he whispered, "If this belongs to them, then what else have they hidden?" The ship's hum grew deeper, louder, almost angry. The walls pulsed like a heartbeat growing faster. The explorers realized they were not visitors here. They were trespassers. And somewhere deep inside the ship, something began to wake fully. Secrets. Within, the air inside the ship grew colder the deeper they went. Their footsteps echoed in long corridors that seemed endless, each lined with walls that pulsed like veins glowing faintly with orange light. The explorers walked slowly, their scanners shaking in their hands, but the readings gave them nothing useful. The ship's energy was too vast, too old, too powerful to measure. Every sound made them tense. The hiss of shifting panels, the soft hum that rose from the floor. It was not silence, it was listening. The ship was awake now, and it was aware of them. The leader walked at the front, his eyes fixed on the glow of the path ahead. He tried to keep his voice steady, though fear gnawed at him. "Remember why we are here? Record everything. We are the first to see this." But his words felt hollow. None of them felt like pioneers. They felt like prey walking deeper into the den of a beast that was watching their every step. They reached another chamber. The walls curved upward into a dome so high it vanished into shadow. At the center of the room stood a tall structure like a throne made of metal, carved with strange shapes that burned faintly with orange fire. Around the edges of the chamber were long glass panels filled with dust and shadows. The explorers moved closer and gasped. Inside the panels were shapes. Human shapes. The youngest staggered back. "No, it cannot be them. It cannot." The forms inside the glass were not alive, but they were not bones either. They were preserved. Some looked asleep, their eyes closed as if they were waiting to wake. They wore armor that none of the explorers had seen before. Heavy, dark, marked with the same sharp human letters carved into the ship. The leader placed a trembling hand on the glass. The figure inside was tall, broad, and unmistakably human. His chest was armored with strange patterns, his hands scarred. His face was calm, his eyes closed. The armor glowed faintly, almost as if the man inside could rise at any moment. The ship's voice returned, low and steady, speaking again in the human tongue. None of the explorers understood the words, but the meaning still sank into their minds. Guardians, protectors, awaiting command. The explorers felt their hearts grow heavy. This was no simple starship. It was a vault, a prison, or perhaps an army frozen in silence, waiting for someone to call them back. The leader whispered, "This is not for us. We should not be here." But before he could order retreat, the throne in the center of the room flared with light. The explorers raised their weapons, but the ship ignored them. From the throne rose a projection, a figure of light forming before their eyes. It was human. A man stood there, tall and unyielding. His armor glowed with the same fire that pulsed in the ship's veins. His eyes were sharp, filled with cold strength, and when his mouth opened, his words were in human language, clear and direct. The explorers could not understand him, but the message burned into their minds all the same. "You are intruders. This ship belongs to humanity. Leave or be judged." Fear tore through them. The youngest dropped his weapon and fell to his knees, trembling. The others stepped back, their eyes locked on the figure. They wanted to flee, but the doors behind them had closed. The ship was holding them here. Then the glass panels around the chamber hissed. Steam poured out as one of the preserved figures stirred. The explorers screamed as the man inside opened his eyes. They were not dead. The preserved soldiers were alive. The leader's voice cracked as he shouted, "Fall back! We should not be here." But it was too late. The soldier inside the glass pressed his hands against the panel. The glass melted away and he stepped forward, his armor glowing brighter with each step. He was not weak, not slow. He moved with the strength of something that had been waiting centuries only to wake and fight again. The explorers raised their weapons, but the ship's hum deepened, and their weapons shut down, powerless. Sparks flew as the energy was drained out of their devices. The soldier looked at them not with curiosity, not with mercy, but with recognition. The ship's voice spoke once more. This time the explorers understood a single word. The sound cut through every language barrier carried by the force of the ship itself. Human. The leader's throat went dry. He realized the truth. This ship was not a relic of an unknown race. It was not alien. It was human. And humanity had built it long before the galaxy thought them capable of anything more than crawling among the stars. The soldier did not strike. He did not attack. He simply turned toward the throne of light and placed a hand upon it. The ship's hum rose higher, the walls glowing brighter, and new corridors opened beyond the chamber. The explorers were not being destroyed. They were being shown more, and the leader, though afraid, understood. This was not a discovery. This was a warning. A piece of history buried on a death world not because it was forgotten, but because it was meant to stay hidden until the right time. The youngest whispered with a shaking voice, "If they could build this before, what are they now?" The soldier raised his head and the light around him pulsed stronger. The chamber walls began to shift, showing new images, fleets burning, death worlds falling, empires crushed under fire. The explorers stood still, their hearts pounding. The truth was now clear. This was only the beginning. The revelation. The chamber trembled with light as the soldier placed his hand upon the throne. Energy surged through the room, and the glass panels holding the other human figures glowed brighter. The explorers could barely stand. Their knees shook as the hum of the ship grew louder, deeper, as if the walls themselves were speaking. Then the throne flared, and the projection of the human commander appeared again. His body was built of light, but his presence felt real, heavy as if he could step down and crush them with a single glance. His eyes burned with cold fire, and when he spoke, his voice rolled through the chamber like thunder. The explorers still could not understand the words. Yet the meaning slid into their minds all the same, carved there by the ship itself. You walk on sacred ground. This is not your place. This is the legacy of humanity. The leader's chest tightened. His people had been taught that humans were latecomers to the stars, fragile survivors from a backwater world who had climbed too fast. Yet this ship, this army sleeping in glass, it told a different story. The projection lifted its hand. The chamber walls shifted, transforming into windows of light. What the explorers saw made their blood run cold. They saw entire fleets burning, ships larger than mountains clashing in the black of space, worlds screaming as fire rained down from above. And at the center of it all, humans, human warships, human armies, human weapons tearing through enemies that no other species dared to face. The vision moved faster. A death world, its surface twisted and violent, fell under human boots. Creatures larger than buildings shrieked and died as soldiers cut them down. Storms that could crush ships were split apart by human machines. The ship's voice echoed again. They ruled where no one else could. They survived where no one else dared. The youngest explorer gripped his chest. His voice cracked. This is not possible. They should not have been here. Not this far back. But deep inside, they all knew the truth. This was not invention. This was history. The projection changed. They saw a council of alien species gathered long ago. Their faces grim, humans stood at the edge of the chamber, silent and waiting. The council whispered, their voices filled with fear. Then the images broke into war again. Alien fleets striking at humans, desperate to erase them. The leader's heart sank. He finally understood. The galaxy had not simply forgotten humanity's past. It had buried it, erased it. The ship's voice filled the chamber once more. This time the explorers understood every word. The ship forced the meaning into their souls. We were cast out. Our name was forbidden. They feared us. They hid us. But we remain, waiting for the call. The explorers stood still, their skin cold with dread. The preserved soldiers in glass stirred again. More of them shifted, their armor glowing with faint fire. The explorers felt the weight of thousands of human warriors sleeping in silence, ready to rise at a moment's notice. The youngest whispered, tears in his eyes. If this is true, if they wake, no one can stand against them. The leader turned to him sharply, his voice hard, though his own fear pressed down on him. No, we cannot allow this knowledge to spread. Do you understand? If the galaxy learns the truth, everything changes. But even as he spoke, the truth burned in his heart. It was already too late. The ship had chosen to wake. The projection raised its head, its eyes glowing brighter. The chamber filled with words again, heavy and final. Humanity does not ask for permission. Humanity does not bow. Humanity remembers. The explorers fell to their knees as the walls cracked with light. They were no longer intruders in a dead relic. They were witnesses to something the galaxy had fought to bury, and humanity, forgotten and erased, was about to return. Humanity's shadow. The chamber was still burning with light. The explorers pressed their backs against the walls, their eyes fixed on the soldier who had stepped out of the glass. His armor glowed faintly, his movements calm but filled with silent strength. He did not look confused or broken after his long sleep. He looked ready. The projection of the human commander remained above the throne, his voice echoing in the explorers' heads. Humanity remembers. The words refused to leave their minds. They circled again and again until they felt heavy with fear. If this ship belonged to humans, if these soldiers were theirs, then every story they had been told about the galaxy's history was a lie. The leader forced himself to breathe. He whispered to his team, his voice shaking. "We must leave. We cannot take this back. If others learn of this..." But before he could finish, the walls of the chamber shifted again. The light spread into new corridors. Images flickered across the walls like living paintings. The explorers could not look away. They saw records not of wars long past, but of worlds still alive. Maps marked with the symbol of humanity. The youngest gasped. "These are coordinates. They still have places hidden." They never left. The ship's hum grew deeper, carrying the words. The shadow of humanity never faded. It waits in silence. It grows in silence. The explorers felt a coldness crawl across their skin. Humanity was not simply surviving on one fragile world. It had been everywhere, building, fighting, hiding, waiting. The galaxy thought humans were young and harmless, but in truth they were old and dangerous. The soldier moved again. He did not strike, but his eyes turned toward the explorers. For a brief moment his gaze locked with theirs, and they felt something worse than fear. Recognition. He saw them not as strangers, but as intruders trespassing in a place that was never meant for them. The leader's legs trembled. He tried to speak, to beg for mercy, but the ship answered first. "You cannot stop what has already begun. Humanity cannot be erased." The explorers wanted to flee, but the ship kept them trapped, forcing them to see more. The walls filled with scenes of destruction. Entire civilizations they recognized, species that had long since vanished, falling under human firepower. Deathworlds bending to human will. Creatures that no other species could tame, now leashed and controlled by humans. The youngest began to cry. His voice broke. They did not survive. They conquered. Everywhere. The leader's throat felt dry as stone. He had thought his people powerful. He had thought the Council of Species safe. But compared to this, compared to what humans had been, they were nothing. Then the throne of light dimmed. The projection of the human commander faded slowly, leaving only the soldier of flesh and blood standing in the chamber. The soldier raised his hand and pressed it against the wall. The ship responded instantly, shaking as if ready to rise from the planet and take flight. Engines deep beneath the ground roared. Dust fell from the ceiling. The explorers clung to each other as the ship began to move. It was not dead metal. It was alive, answering to its master. The soldier spoke a single word in his language. None of the explorers understood, but the meaning still cut into them. Awaken. The glass panels around the chamber cracked. More soldiers stirred, their eyes glowing faintly as the fog lifted from their long sleep. The explorers could not count them all, hundreds, maybe thousands. All human. Already, the leader's heart pounded in his chest. He knew then that this discovery was not a gift. It was a curse. To take this secret back to the Council would mean chaos. The galaxy would know that humanity was not weak, not new, not innocent. They would know the truth, that humans had ruled the shadows long before any other species dared to walk into them. The ship's voice returned one last time, steady and final. The galaxy forgot, but forgetting does not erase. Humanity remains. Humanity returns. The explorers fell silent. They no longer felt like discoverers. They felt like survivors who had wandered into the wrong place. As the ship rose higher, breaking free from the chains of the Deathworld, the leader finally spoke. His words were heavy, almost broken. "We should never have come here. This was never meant for us." But it was too late. The ship was awake. The soldiers were awake, and the shadow of humanity had returned to the galaxy.